Let me tell you the story of how it was that we got in with Ozzy Osbourne. Sharon Osbourne told this story publicly on Piers Morgan.
How close did you come, Sharon, to kicking him out?
Oh, I was just really broken in every sense.
She cut every sleeve off every coat I own.
Did you?
Yeah.
Some years ago, Sharon found out that Ozzy was having some extracurricular activity outside of his marriage. So she went through Ozzy's closet and she cut the sleeves off of all of his suits. Enter Dimitri and LGFG Fashion House. Like, hey, we'd like to have you wear our suits. It didn't hurt that he needed some suits because the sleeves off his suits were sheared off by Sharon. Now, some considerations when working with a guy like Ozzy Osbourne. Let's first of all look at it from a tailor's perspective, okay? One of the things a tailor needs to evaluate is the body of the person for whom they are tailoring. And Ozzy has a fairly easy body to tailor for because Ozzy is a very average build all around. He is not rotund, he's not particularly thin, he is not overly tall or short, he's sort of a very average build man. And that is a great thing for tailoring because there are considerations when you're talking about pattern and style of a cut of a suit. When you have an average build, you can wear anything. There's nothing wrong with making Ozzy Osbourne a flat front or a pleated trouser. He can wear both. Stylistically, a guy that's quite large would have a hard time with a flat front trouser. It's not as visually stimulating to look at versus, for example, somebody who is very tall and thin. You wouldn't want to put them into a heavy chalk stripe. That would evoke the image of a man wearing his father's suit. You don't have to worry about things like lapel width. For Ozzy, those considerations are out the window because everything will work pattern-wise. So that's a great canvas to work on as a tailor. Although I will say that as a custom tailor, I think there's a preference for a body shape that's more idiosyncratic because then you have an opportunity to really provide value in accentuating the best features, washing out the less appealing features, and equalizing things across the board, making somebody's body look proportionate through their clothing, which is a fun aspect of tailoring for us because the client will look in the mirror and say, I look great in the suit. Versus with Ozzy, everything works. So that's the first thing we're looking from a tailoring perspective. Figurations are something that do need tailoring very specific to each client. For example, like most men who spend a lot of time sitting down, you see something called a forward pointing shoulder, and you see that quite often with a forward neck, and this is something you develop over time. I remember Trevor Linden being an example. He was the former captain of the Vancouver Canucks, and he had a very sloped shoulder on one side. And so you see that in hockey players, if they're a left-hand shot, you're going to see a significant left drop because they're just always putting pressure like that. So Ozzy had a bit of a forward pinch shoulder, but other than that, there was really nothing about Ozzy's body that was outside of the realm of normal. I mean, very much an average build. So as a tailor, I'm going to refer you guys to Dress Like a Boss. So this is actually a book by Michael Franzese in conjunction with LGFG Fashion House, where we talk about which body shapes would be ideal for which kind of garments. Again, Ozzy being of average build, everything works. So we take a look at, first of all, the overall body shape. Then we look at the body idiosyncrasies. We have a forward pointing shoulder, which requires a different cut across the chest and the shoulder panel so that you don't have creases in the armpits. You have a S shape, so basically like a sway figure. So we have to account for where the pants sit on the hips so we don't create lines across the hips. And that also accounts for how we cut the jacket a little bit deeper at the back so that we have a jacket that fits right but also isn't too thick through the middle. And then the next consideration after body shape, we have to consider lifestyle. So this is something very important with our clients. For example, a gentleman or lady that travels a lot will start to become concerned with wrinkle qualities of their clothing because it just becomes a hassle to deal with unpacking things and not being able to wear them neatly. And so one consideration for Ozzy Osbourne would be, first of all, the material it's constructed from, like wool, like cotton, and all those things. However, in competition with the anti-wrinkling, we don't want things that are hot for Ozzy for a couple of reasons. Number one, Ozzy's in his 70s. Like, you don't want to be in your 70s and feel hot in your clothing. You're already wanting to wear things that are light and comfortable. So we don't want things that are hot on Ozzy. And the other thing is, because he's podcasting from his home studio, he's often under lights because you need good lighting. There's cameras. The rooms can get hot. With Ozzy, we have to consider the travel aspect because he just went to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He's a guy that wears LGFG. You saw Zakk Wylde on stage. He's a guy that wears LGFG. You saw Robert Trujillo on stage. That's a guy who wears LGFG. So we're looking at wrinkle resistance, we're looking at not getting hot. And so we actually went in a sort of a bifurcated way. On one side, you have the stuff that he's going to be wearing on travel, and the other side is you have stuff he's going to be wearing on camera. And so those are kind of the two different approaches we took to combine this wardrobe. And then for Ozzy, there's one other aspect. Now, this is the final aspect of tailoring, and very few tailors get an opportunity to experience this. The other aspect is brand image. Everybody has a personal brand, but for most of us tailors, we're working with lawyers and bankers, and those are all professions that have certain customs and rituals which are repeating over and over. So while brand image and personal image is something important for a tailor to consider when working with clients, there's a heritage of Ozzy Osbourne, which is very esoteric to Ozzy Osbourne, because there's one Ozzy Osbourne and we have to consider the background image. And what is the image of Ozzy Osbourne? So we have to think about darker themes. We have to think about gothic colors. Like, you don't go pure red on Ozzy Osbourne, but you can go a certain shade of maroon. You know, you can't go full blue on Ozzy Osbourne because that's going to be very generic and anti-Ozzy. But you can go lapis lazuli on Ozzy as a color because it's a more gothic spin on a typical blue. So we have to consider derivatives of pure colors when we're designing his wardrobe in order to pay homage to his image. And then the last thing is, when you're thinking about image, there's a cut aspect. So Ozzy wears a lot of 3/4 length suit jackets. So think about a regular pant and a vest, but the suit jacket is actually cut like a top coat. So we're talking like 4-button front going down just past the knee on a suit jacket. That's not something that you would see on a typical, let's say, accountant. That wouldn't make any sense. So we have to consider for Ozzy also the image. So when we're designing Ozzy Osbourne, we have a fairly typical body, like an average body, which is good for having the validity to explore different patterns and not run into any creative risks. You have some basic bodily twists and turns. All of us do as we live life, and nothing on Ozzy is really too out of sorts for what we see every day. Then you have the use factor, so travel and podcasts, and then you have the image factor. So for image, let's start there. We used a lot of Ozzy imagery, like bats, like crosses, like concerts. Really, he's one of the godfathers of rock. I mean, I put Ozzy up there with Alice Cooper. And we did Alice Cooper's wardrobe as well. But for Ozzy, we definitely went with that gothic rock and roll theme. And the colors, what I love about the colors is we were able to work with everyday colors, but with richer and derivative textures. So for example, there's a beautiful overshirt we made for Ozzy, and we made it in a dark wash denim. So instead of using like a classic blue, we did an overshirt. We put a couple extra pockets on it to give a little depth to the action of the shirt because we don't want it to look simplistic. And in the dark wash, it has this sort of a rich blue with gray intersect on it, which adds depth to the garment. It was fantastic on Ozzy. It so perfectly worked with his golden accessories and his canes. It was just beautiful. And then another example would be like a very risky garment where we did a deep maroon 3/4 length linen wool. So this is a podcast garment, so it's got a very striking color contrast to the rest of Ozzy because you have a lot of black on Ozzy and then you have this sort of deep maroon. And the linen in the wool on this jacket accomplishes two things. Number one, it makes it more breathable because linen's great for breathability. And number two, the textures of the linen add depth. And so with Ozzy, when you're doing a wardrobe for Ozzy, you're always thinking about micro details and depth. Like the 3-piece 3/4 length suit we did for him, the stripes say Ozzy Osbourne in gold. Now, we haven't done gold lettering before. The reason we did gold is because Ozzy wears a lot more gold than he does silver. He's a gold guy. So that matched perfectly with his jewelry. And then the buttons on that jacket were skulls. We actually just had some skulls that we bought, like some emblems, like some skull jewelry. And then we put buttonholes through them and then we sewed them into the jacket. So we had real silver skull buttons. Again, why silver? Because it juxtaposes beautifully with gold. Other examples that we implemented in Ozzy's wardrobe, lots of stripes. Stripes evoke power, right? Ozzy's image is quite a lot to do with power. This is actually where him and Alice Cooper are a little bit different. With Alice Cooper, you can't really think of his band off the top of your head, even though they're all fantastic musicians. And with Ozzy Osbourne, you immediately can identify who his guitar players were, and even when Dio replaced him, even though his replacement, because everything's done to a level of power. So there was a lot of power in consideration. There was wrinkle resistance in consideration, and we're talking about top pieces that are considerate of his podcasting. So lots of cotton blends, linen blends, some bamboo blends, just things that are going to breathe better, but are still going to perform excellent on camera with the color and contrast that are appropriate to Ozzy's rock and roll image and to Ozzy Osbourne himself.